Hello and welcome to the State of Social Sustainability in the Building Equitable Destinations and Supply Chains. Today we have 6 amazing expert panel and a wonderful moderator, Ms. Stephanie Jones, with whom Institute of Tourism will cooperate to create a more inclusive tourism worldwide.
I look forward to doing meaningful work together for our industry. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's global conversation on the state of social sustainability in building equitable destinations and supply chains. I am Stephanie M. Jones, the CEO of Disrupt for Change and the founder of the Diversity Tourism Academy, and I am honored to serve as your moderator today. Now, as a longtime advocate for equity alignment within the global travel and tourism industry, my work is focused on helping destinations, brands, and tourism boards recognize that social sustainability is more than a buzzword. It's a blueprint for building more inclusive, resilient, and culturally vibrant tourism ecosystems. Now, through Disrupt for Change, we work to ensure that underrepresented small and micro-tourism enterprises, especially those led by Black and Indigenous entrepreneurs, are not excluded from supply chains that drive tourism's economic engine. Through our Diversity Tourism Academy, we train underrepresented SMEs and cultural museum professionals on how to navigate the complexities of the global tourism and hospitality with equity, access, and education at the core. Now, today's discussion isn't just timely, it's essential. And as the industry continues to evolve, we have an opportunity to reimagine what equitable destinations can look like when social sustainability is embraced as a guiding principle, not just an optional add-on. Now, to help frame our conversation, I'd like to share a brief video that reflects my perspective on how social sustainability can serve as a powerful lever to drive equity across destinations and supply chains. Then I'll introduce and invite our distinguished panelists to share their thought leadership based on the great work that they do through their organizations. We will have time for Q&A at the end of our discussion, so please post your questions in the chat. And also, please ensure your mic remains on mute. Again, thank you for joining us. And bear with me one moment while I share my video with you. We talk a lot about sustainability in tourism, emissions, overuse, green solutions, but I want to start with something deeper. I want to start with people, because the most underaddressed form of sustainability in our industry is social sustainability, the kind that asks who gets to participate, who gets to profit, and who continues to be left out. I've spent over 2 decades working in tourism, marketing it, developing it, advocating for it. But I've also spent that time in communities where tourism happens to people, not with them. And that disconnect, it shows up in our supply chains, our policies, our partnerships. We have entire ecosystems of small and micro tourism businesses, Black-owned tour operators, Indigenous cultural guides, community-run museums that are rich in knowledge, history, and creativity. And yet they remain invisible to the very institutions tasked with destination stewardship. And the truth is, if your ESG plan doesn't include equitable procurement, if your CSR doesn't support supplier diversity, if your destination strategy doesn't create pathways for underrepresented businesses to thrive, then it's not truly sustainable. Social sustainability is not a department, it's a design. So what does that design look like? It looks like procurement that's accessible to small businesses. It looks like policy that prioritizes shared ownership. It looks like partnerships rooted in trust, not tokenism. And it looks like capacity building that doesn't just teach, but transfers power. This work isn't charity. It's not trend-driven. It's transformation, because tourism done right doesn't just move people. It moves economies, culture, and possibility. That's the call today. Let's move from intention to impact, from marketing inclusion to measuring it, because the future of tourism is equitable or it is extractive. And we get to decide which world we're building. All right. So let's get started. So let me first introduce our distinguished panel members. And let me start with Kelly Gillespie. Kelly is a sustainable tourism professional and experienced program manager and director for 25 years, working across the hospitality, tourism, for-profit, and nonprofit sectors. In 2024, she rejoined the Planetera team as a senior director and head of impact to support the organization as it continues to grow and flourish in its community tourism, climate, and biodiversity global initiatives. Welcome, Kelly. And now we also have Jonathan Coleman with us, who is the CEO of Untours and co-CEO of the Untours Foundation, which is the world's first certified B Corporation that facilitates community-based travel, primarily in Europe. The foundation invests its entire endowment in mission-aligned companies and use that focus as a catalyst for other funders to join their shared efforts. Welcome, Jonathan. Thank you for joining us. And then we have David Micah Jenigan, who believes that many are called, but few are chosen. And through his South African-based enterprise, Dot Connectors, they unpack mandates for governments, corporations, and professionals to discover the call for tangible impact and transformation. And thank you for joining us from South Africa, David. Next, we have Charles DeBell III. Charles is the president and CEO of the National Black Chamber of Commerce. In his role over the past 2 decades, he has worked in every department of the NBCC, joining in 1999 as liaison to the Global Federation of Black Chambers across the Americas, Europe, the Caribbean, and Africa. This role marked the beginning of the NBCC's transformation into a global advocate for Black-owned enterprises. Welcome, Charles. And then we have Timothy Marshall with us. Timothy has served as board chairman of the International Institute for Peace through Tourism since 1997. In this role, he has addressed global summits at the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East on the economic, environmental, climate change, and cultural sustainability of the tourism sector through global peace initiatives. Timothy has established a national economic development pilot program for the Clinton administration, which was replicated in 16 major markets throughout the United States. Welcome, Timothy. And then we have Ulrike Gretzel, who's the Director of Research at Netnographica. She's also the Senior Fellow for the Center for Public Relations at the University of Southern California. Welcome, Ulrike. Again, thank you all for taking time to join us today. Now, I would like to invite each of our panelists to address a question about social sustainability and what it means to them and how they implement it through their work. So let's kick off this conversation hearing from Kelly.
Unmute myself. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here, and thank you to Stephanie and Institute of Tourism for organizing. For me and for us at Planetera, what we really see social sustainability is truly the social impact potential of inclusive and equitable supply chains. Much as what Stephanie was saying in her video, I was nodding my head the whole time because in practice, this means contracts with community-owned and led organizations, social impact organizations, small nonprofits, and micro enterprises and small enterprises that are owned by underrepresented communities and really see their role and their business as uplifting the community members that they work with. And so that leading to improving socioeconomic outcomes. Some of the things that we measure, for example, that I'll share more a bit about later, but increasing revenue from tourism, of course, or increasing income and new jobs created and increased participation for women and youth and indigenous and other underrepresented peoples, and also increasing participation in cultural traditions and improving gender equality and much more that I can share more when we talk about impact measurement. But to me, there's so many and to Planetara aspects of social sustainability that can be measured in terms of local satisfaction and participation that really makes that up that piece.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Jonathan, please share your perspective.
Sure. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Um, the stats I often like to share is I talk a little bit about our work and why we think tourism is important is because tourism represents 10% of global GDP, 10% of global jobs, almost 10% of global emissions. The industry has a massive impact on where the world goes, for good or ill. The industry matters. It truly does matter. And so as a society, as a world, we can't ignore it, and we need to better harness it for good, specifically in the host destinations. Um, and so the other important stat that drives our work is that 80% of tourism businesses are small businesses. Many of those community-based businesses kind of bubbled up from within the community, trying to again harness the power of tourism to provide good jobs for the entrepreneur and their family, but then more broadly to make their community stronger. So we think that it's incredibly important. Our niche in the market is understanding that if we want to have small businesses in the industry grow and be more impactful, have more sustainability initiatives, both social and environmental sustainability initiatives, be able to access kind of the markets in the way that we all know they need to in order to empower this community-based tourism and this social sustainability within tourism, they need capital. In business, oftentimes you need capital to grow. And so we are, at the UnTourist Foundation, we created the Reset Tourism Fund, which exists to provide flexible and affordable capital to small businesses in tourism who are using their business to make their communities better. And with the goal, understanding that there's a lot of money that's needed and we don't have enough, and so kind of setting a platform so we can bring other partners to the table. We put some of our money into it, but we have partners like Expedia and Skyscanner and TUI and some other of the larger corporations who contribute to that fund and allow us to then provide this flexible financing to small businesses around the world. And we just think that's a massive need and massive gap in the industry if we're going to accomplish all the things we're talking about today. So I think that's just the bigger picture is how do we empower the small businesses, empower these local businesses to do what they know how to do. And some of that's around money, and that's what we do. But then there's all these other components as well, which is part of what my partners on the panel are involved in.
Thank you, Jonathan. And you're right. The lack of funding and the ability to access funding is, I think, the greatest barrier for SMEs to really be able to sustain and scale and build profitable businesses. But I think it's actually universal, not just within our industry, but across the board, all industries. So I think our industry, because it's so profitable, we can do a better job of making certain that financial resources are accessible. And the work that you're doing through the Tourism Reset Fund is a tremendous role model that hopefully can be replicated across across the world. So thank you for that. Let's hear from Ariki.
Hi, everyone. I have worked with a lot of destinations as well as communities and museums over the years on social sustainability projects, but I'm going to speak more from the academic perspective today. And from that perspective, social sustainability is nothing new, but the problem is that it's very fragmented literature. The research happens in different pockets, like accessible tourism or indigenous tourism or community-based tourism or tourism and justice or Black travel or gender in travel. So we have only very fragmented insights. I think maybe the regenerative tourism discourse that is happening right now provides an opportunity there. But in general, I see that there are many issues and many groups that remain under-researched. We have new players in this industry. We have non-traditional operators, players, Airbnb hosts, or Uber drivers, right? We have new platforms, and they really change the power relationships at a destination and also in the industry at large. So from my perspective, there is a lot more to do on social sustainability, and I'm really appreciating this conversation because I'm hoping that some of you will be inspired to either do research yourself or work with someone in academia on a project on social sustainability.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you for providing that perspective. Charles, let's hear from you.
This is really a not only dynamic, but it is a needed conversation, and I bring a small business entrepreneurial advocacy perspective to the dialogue and the conversation, and we're really approaching and seeing this from a macro and a micro kind of approach, and we're really talking about the whole universe right now of global economic development. What are the elements? What are the dynamics? Where do the dots connect? What is driving it? And then there is a gap in the disconnect on the nationalization of it. When you're talking about economic development, you're really looking at every molecule, every dynamic, every link in the chain that goes there. Tourism is definitely one of those, but not necessarily leading in that aspect of it. But on the other hand, when you lead on, like with this group in particular, our common interests of tourism, we're looking at saying, where do we stand? What's the disposition of it? What's missing? Or how can we do more? And particularly when we're talking about destination, we're talking about a place that maybe people have been going, and what's new or what's different. Well, the dynamic that you bring to the table now is this flourish of global economic development, emerging economies, and maybe you've had money and you could go do maybe a safari, or maybe you went to the islands, or you went to these places. Now we're looking at how do we activate and move people that maybe aren't tourists, but today we're traveling for commerce or for business or for what they're ultimately. Anytime you're moving about and going and utilizing hospitality, you're a tourist or in that sector. There's money that's drawn from it. So thank you for having me here today, but giving me this opportunity to hear all these different dynamics. Certainly, capital is always one, but it's 360 degrees of it. So we're looking at speaking to the governments in particularly, and how the budgets are designated and allocated, and where they're spending the money and for what and how. In turn, to realize what they're asking for is we need investors. When people come to us, particularly governments in particular, they're looking for investors, and we're putting new language or new definition to language in that entrepreneurs are more entrepreneurial first and will invest in something they're interested in doing. So that starts to immediately go into hotels, restaurants. What's the attraction? If you're going to build a new stadium, as we have throughout many different countries, what's going to be around it to support it? What are the activities that are coming into that? So that's what I'm talking about in terms of there's a micro or macro place of that, and then there's the actual tour operator, or how are we bringing what people and for what event. And so when we're working together or having some of a more of a collective dialogue, we're able to look at saying that, man, that we really have this real estate that we're trying to develop here, and we have to give people a reason to want to come to that destination. And then as you do that, the real estate proposition has this that's much more value. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for inviting me, and I could go on and on, but please continue to moderate and guide us towards the most productive line of conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Charles. So let's hear from South Africa. Micah, can you share your perspective based on the work you're doing in South Africa?
Thanks, Stephanie. And also thank you to the Institute of Tourism. It's a privilege to join you guys. South Africa is a unique proposition. When you look at South Africa and you look at across Africa, stories become the bedrock of society for us as individuals. Tourism becomes the vehicle to tell these stories and to share the insights of the beautiful people, the beautiful story that South Africa has at a macro level. But really, the essence comes in at a micro level when you go into our communities, when you engage with our SMMEs, when you start to understand the diversity in terms of our culture. South Africa is blessed in the sense that we have an economic reform policy which is currently underway, which really looks at shifting transactional models to transformative partnerships. And at the heart of that, we look at policy tools that we've adopted, things like BBBEE, which is Black Economic Empowerment, this amazing constitution which binds us and keeps us humane in every essence and makes us unique as South Africans. What we're starting to see now is that while global institutions are waking up to the fact that more inclusive growth equates to smart economics, for South Africa, for us, it's a moral and historical necessity to correct the wrongs of the past so that we can have an equal economic platform. The beauty about our constitution and a lot of these mandates that our government continues to press forward is that we have engagement both at a public sector environment, which is representative of our governments, our constituents, but more importantly, we have private sector's involvement in this. So, when Charles spoke about having institutional investors, we have a variety of them. The beauty about South Africa is, as diverse as our culture is, our economies are also diverse based on industry. So we have a unique value proposition for the tourism sector, which is governed under the Tourism Sector Code, which looks at economic reform specifically for that particular industry. And my hope is that in some of the questions, we can add some value. We can share the context of what's taking place within South Africa, but also to share the lens at a macro level, what we are seeing on a global footprint, and to give you guys some context as to what established protocols we've actually utilized, the frameworks that have worked for us, and to paint a picture of optimism for the international market that if South Africa can, everyone else can. And yeah, I'll leave that with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And let's hear from Timothy.
Thank you, Stephanie and Raisa, for bringing us together to address this most critical topic. Let me begin by saying that social sustainability is central to the work of the International Institute for Peace through Tourism. And we've been involved in this movement for sustainable tourism from its very beginnings. Let me just share with you that there are three core guiding principles for the Institute, and they are peace with our Creator, peace with nature, which is our environmental focus, and peace with each other. And that is our social sustainability platform. And we found that all of these principles find themselves interconnected. Now, while we work with major corporate entities in the travel and tourism industry, our heart is with the small minority and women-owned businesses in the industry, because they are so crucial to the industry's future. Now, the concept of sustainable tourism was first introduced at IPT's first global conference in Vancouver in 1988, and subsequently pioneered early initiatives towards implementing the first code of ethics and guidelines for sustainable tourism. And the first international study on models of best practices was done at the request of the UN and presented at the first international conference in sustainable tourism in 1994 in Montreal. So we've been involved in this area for quite some time. An important sustainability initiative of the Institute is our Global Peace Park program. And Stephanie, I know you said that oftentimes the focus is environmental, but as I said, we see that social sustainability, economic sustainability, and environmental sustainability are truly interconnected. And we worked with the government of Canada during its 125th anniversary, including the leadership of the federal government, major corporate leaders, and leading NGOs to collaborate on establishing 350 peace parks across Canada. And today we now have over 450 peace parks on 6 continents around the world. One of our core principles, as I said, is peace with nature. And this represents a key aspect of our work with global strategies to minimize ecological footprint from the exponential growth of tourism worldwide. But the social sustainability piece benefits significantly from that. So in closing, let me just say that one of our upcoming initiatives is to work with local governments around the world to help achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to implement the Paris Agreement and the new urban agenda for sustainable urban development, which has been advanced by the United Cities and Local Governments Organization. Our goal with them is to have global peace parks in 2,000 cities and towns around the world, but it is SMEs and local citizens who will be driving the establishment and the maintaining of those peace parks, which will generate both economic and job opportunities and other opportunities for local communities. So that's just a little bit of background, and I can get into more details later.
Wow, thank you. Thank you all for sharing your perspective on social sustainability as it relates to the work that you're doing. So, Jonathan, I'm going to come back to you. Where do you see the biggest gaps between sustainability commitments and actual inclusion of underrepresented SMEs and communities in tourism ecosystems, especially from a funding perspective?
Excuse me. Yeah, it's a good question. And I think I kind of foreshadowed my answer a little bit in my intro earlier. But, in this industry, there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of NGOs talking and training and providing knowledge, and it's all important, truly, truly important. But it's just missing a key part when you're talking about business, because business is built on the fundamentals of money, and we don't need to be scared of that as like kind of socially focused, impact focused people, which I know that we all are. Um, Business broadly is a powerful tool, and so we need to better use it so that we can have a better world. And so in my mind, and this is what we identified with the Untours Foundation as we started looking at where to move forward a couple of years ago, as we were trying to understand where we best fit in the larger landscape. And it was really like, okay, yeah, there's a huge capital gap. We all want the small businesses to get bigger and better. There's lots of people, lots of institutions and organizations providing training and providing other resources, but almost none are providing money. And if they are, it's a grant and it's very competitive, and it's a really kind of slightly different model. And so we said, okay, well, we know how to do this, so we're going to come in and try to provide capital, typically in the form of a low interest loan. But it's money that needs to get paid back. It's a business style intervention. But if we're supporting businesses, and that, then that needs to be a piece of the puzzle. And we just see it kind of time after time after time after time that we've got amazing entrepreneurs with amazing capacity and amazing drive, and they can grow slowly, time, bit by bit, just organically. But if we really want to accelerate that growth, we have to provide the capital, and we need to be able to do it with different kind of risk profile and return expectation if we really want to see the maximum of the potential impact. So in our case, like, we need our money back without a doubt. We do our due diligence. We expect to be repaid, but our expectations aren't maybe the same that a traditional investor would have, because some of those expectations are some of the barriers to why the money's not flowing already. So yeah, it's a really key gap in the overall ecosystem if we're really going to see these SMEs accomplish all that they can and should. So that's where I spend my time, but obviously then therefore that's where I think is like one of the key things that everyone should think about.
Absolutely. And I have personally, and firsthand witnessed the impact of the work that you're doing because I've recommended some of the SMEs that are in our network for funding, and you all help them. And sometimes, for small businesses, especially Black and Brown businesses, they just need a hand up, not a handout, to be able to scale. Because as you said, we are full of creative ideas and passion, but it takes money to move any mission. And that's oftentimes where a lot of small businesses fall short because they're not able to access the capital. So I commend you all in the work that you're doing because you're not just talking about it, you're actually investing in these small businesses and really helping them to become better positioned to build sustainable, scalable, and profitable businesses. So thank you all for the work that you're doing through the Reset Tourism Fund.
You're
Timothy,
welcome.
oh, I'm sorry, go
Sorry, I was
ahead.
just going to make one quick addition to say that ideally, traditional investment will be what comes next for these businesses as well. So we know that we need to maybe bridge the gap with some like slightly lower return expectations and slightly different risk profile. But the idea is to get to the point where they're very attractive to more traditional investors. And then we're out of the way, and then the sky's the limit. And so that's like the opportunity that we're kind of leading towards.
It's just opening the door, which oftentimes, again, so many doors are closed to these underrepresented SMEs. And, we need more entities to open doors to allow these businesses access to walk through them. So thank you for that. Okay, I would love to hear Timothy. Would you like me to reread the question or are you good?
No, I'm good. I'll jump on in here. We see the biggest gaps at the local level where local communities are trained and supported and empowered through community tourism networks. And one of our chapters in Jamaica is a recognized leader in the field of community tourism. And they're involved in creating business improvement districts and partnerships with local chambers of commerce and other institutions, including training and community tourism entrepreneurship, basic hospitality skills for employers and employees, special interest marketing to understand the importance of market segmentation analysis and developing targeted marketing campaigns, but very importantly, access to capital to undergird all of this with broad support for the entire network. One of the things that we're looking at there are two examples I'd like to just share with you in terms of access to capital. Many years ago, during the time when banks were required in the United States to provide funding to small minority and women-owned businesses and to deal with the impediments to access to capital, there were created funds that provided sub-debt, mezzanine, and equity financing with modular credit scoring models so that small businesses could qualify. And in those instances, a number of businesses ended up getting access to capital. And that was at the local level. Now, at the national level of the United States, through a lot of pressure on previous administrations, the US Department of Treasury began to provide funding through community development finance institutions, CDFIs. And I happen to sit on one of the boards of one of those organizations. And through that initiative, we provided funding to local groups to build hospitals, build schools, and build all kinds of resources that the communities need. So we think that those kinds of alternative financing models are critical for the tourism sector to look at. And there's the financing is there. We just have to get the major tourism entities, major corporate tourism entities, to begin to more creatively invest in those initiatives. We believe that communities need to become more aware of the value of their lifestyle and the community assets they possess without having to artificially create attractions for visitors. We believe that they need to value and conserve their natural environments, understand the importance of training in all aspects of sustainable development, and understand the value of networking and collaboration in order to share knowledge, experiences, skills, and resources. And in this way, they will achieve greater impact and results. This includes working with established community tourism organizations and not reinvent the wheel. And once this is done, they will be able to achieve market differentiation and promote their unique assets and experiences they offer. Finally, we believe that local leadership is needed to drive these projects on an ongoing basis, and that establishing standards to measure the success of their social sustainability initiatives are key to long-term success. So I should note that there are internationally accepted certifications that all of us probably know about for sustainability, such as EarthCheck and others, which can be very helpful. So I will stop because I can just keep talking. I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Well, you were hitting the nail on the head. So thank you for sharing that. So we probably have some tourism boards or destination marketing organizations joining us today. So I want to talk a little bit about what they can do around social sustainability. So Kelly, how can tourism boards and brands measure success in social sustainability beyond visitation numbers and economic metrics? Because we know with tourism boards and DMOs, it's really all about the heads and beds, the number of tourists that are visiting their destination. But how can they measure success beyond the visitation numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to look more broadly at this topic because if we just focus on the numbers, we're not actually of to the destination, we're not really looking at who all is benefiting from that. And I wanted to point out a really useful tool that we used at Planetara to update our impact measurement system. And it's called Achieving the Sustainable Development Goals Through Tourism, a toolkit of indicators. I can share the link here in the chat. But it goes through every single sustainable development goal, so across all of the social and environmental areas, but it positions potential indicators that you could use or metrics of success or impact, whether if you're a destination, a regional body, a national tourism authority, or if you're a travel company. So basically, it allows you to think about, okay, what's my role and how could I impact this area? So to broader social well-being. So in the SDG around education, what can I be doing? What's my role if I'm a tourism authority or a business? How can I Maybe it's how I'm providing more access to professional development and education to my own employees, or maybe I'm funding an organization that is building knowledge and skills for SMEs in the tourism industry to build greater access to education if I'm a destination. And likewise, throughout all of the different indicators, cultural, heritage, revalorization and participation, new job creation, access to living wages, even access to healthcare and gender equity. And it gives real examples of indicators of how you can adapt those to your own business model and put that into place. So I really recommend taking a look at that because it can make you think, okay, this is what I could actually do to measure, but then what are the actions I'd have to do in order to be able to measure? So from destinations perspective or the tourism authorities looking at what is that participation across diverse business owners and nonprofit and social impact organizations in their region. Um, uh, how are they promoting those tourism experiences? The destinations, that's one of their biggest roles. So how can they be actually utilizing their marketing power and prowess that they have to spotlight those kind? And there's great examples of DMOs that have done that. That certainly happy to share. And then partnerships, how can they work with the travel companies to help them identify those kinds of community-led or underrepresented owners and entrepreneurs to get included into the supply chains of tourism in their destinations. And then on the company side, often you'll see if you look at the global sustainable tourism criteria and other aspects under the social, there's a lot of focus on employment practices, which of course are important, paying living wages and things like that. But sometimes procurement is left out of that. And that is probably the most powerful way that any business can impact, no matter what kind of business, or even if you're a nonprofit, what am I buying? Where am I putting my dollars? And who can I potentially include in my supply chain that is going to have ripple effects in communities beyond one sole owner, for example. So just a few examples there, but there's certainly lots of examples out there and really good indicators for what you can do depending on what your business model is.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. That's very insightful. And thank you for sharing that tool. If you don't mind providing
Yeah,
that,
I will do that right now,
I'm
actually.
certain it'll be a helpful tool for some of our attendees. Thank you. Ariki, I would love for you to also weigh in on this question.
Yes, I have to say, when I work with destination marketing organizations, very often what they do is maybe a traditional resident attitude survey or some customer sentiment, and unfortunately, very often these are just PR exercises. And I think these indicators are also a great starting point for DMOs. But I just need to warn everyone that sometimes they become just a ticking off the boxes kind of exercise. So what I have seen is that the most successful destinations in terms of social sustainability are those who are actually having conversations with the entrepreneurs at the destinations, with the residents, with the attractions, with maybe also with the big tech platforms that are operating. So I think if they're just measuring more qualitatively, also what they hear from these stakeholders, I think this is so valuable to them, and you cannot replace that that kind of type of insight with numbers. So the numbers are important. The numbers are important also for transparency and accountability, showing what you're doing. But I think actually really socially sustainable destinations, they go beyond that. They're actually asking questions, they're listening, and they're doing this on a continuous basis, not once in a while looking at some indicators.
Right. So it's not performative.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. So my next question, I would love to hear from Charles and Micah, but let's start with you, Charles. What policies or governance frameworks have proven effective in institutionalizing equity?
The 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 default position really is there needs to be more mandating. When there is a suggestion or a concept or an idea, it doesn't have the accountability, it doesn't have the tracking, and therefore it doesn't yield the results.
Right.
So we're supportive and advocating and almost pressing. If you're really serious about economic development or about building your business or about the whole ecosystem vertical, that all these things are interacting with each other. So one of the big things that is historical, that is a matter of fact, it's a part of history, is you could take the year of return that Ghana did, for example, and how a institutional, I mean, it may not have started off as a public-private partnership, but in the end, you can look at it and see the cooperative nature of all the players that were involved and the net results, which is very tangible, which is even covering it. So the government says, hey, we need to do something. We want to bring people, particularly Americans, Afro-Americans, but with a certain economic resourcefulness on how they could come in and what they could do, and then tied it with the hotels and with the activities, and then put other things that you could get into that you're there, such as business development. And that triggered a whole growth and development of how other things were being developed. Since that time, we've had more interest from not only the civil society, the private sector, but also the government on how do we get their level of sophistication and understanding and knowing what to ask for. That was an example of a whole country, not just a sector or a thing. Just we don't know. We're just going to move all these people in and have this thing and welcome them, and people kind of osmosize into the community and came out, whether it was interest in agriculture or real estate or hotel development or bed and breakfast or smart cities, which really started impacting everything. But it really fueled a back and forth or a tourism-based initiative. One that just happened maybe less than a month or so ago was the African Leadership Summit in Angola, of where the Corporate Council for Africa sponsored and promoted, partnered with the government of Angola. Well, from our side and our perspective, we're looking at saying, yeah, okay, they're going to have all these presidents there and they're going to do that, which has happened before. And we're kind of like listening to see, is there anything different about this? Well, this time the government allocated a budget, a fund, just to use this as a showcase for a basis for tourism, a basis of interest, to say that, hey, Angola's being progressive. We're open for business. We don't care what level. It's not just corporate or Fortune 500 or multinationals that are just coming straight for the deal and whatever we can do and to come out, but other people to come in and around it. So there is a whole yet to develop or evolve tourism kind of component where there was promotional video footage shot. They went and they took the perspectives of the shop owners or the people that yield the benefit of these dollars and things that come in, this money that's spent in the methodology of tourism. So when we talk about local content, that starts to put tangibility, puts facts into place to where you got to think about it, and it's not always, and sometimes we have a tendency as critics to come in and say, well, you're not doing this or you're not doing that. And sometimes it's just a matter of, well, I didn't think of it like that. And I even saw someone make a comment in the chat here that's saying, well, sometimes these small businesses aren't ready. That's very true. Capacity, training, education, mentoring, protéging, all these elements have to come together, but the only way it comes together when we can have some degree of unification, which is kind of like what you're starting here with this dialogue. So
awesome. Thank you, Charles. Thank you. I also want to add something that you just mentioned about the helping small businesses get tourism ready so that they can be positioned to participate in tourism ecosystems, because I think that's also a piece that we overlook. When governments and people in the industry want to be intentional about creating economic opportunities, we also have to sometimes pause and say, well, are the businesses ready to be integrated into supply chains? And that's the work that our organization does. We help them get tourism ready so that they can become players with society, in the industry. So thank you for that perspective. But I also would love to hear from Micah based on what you're doing in South Africa.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm going to go straight for the throat on this one.
Do it.
Before attempting to solve a problem, we must first admit that one exists. And I think what South Africa is doing at the moment is that we're identifying problems that exist. We are still on the journey to admitting the truth of the reality that we sit in. From my perspective, the most effective frameworks that we've seen adopted starts with three very distinct qualities: accountability, inclusivity, and what we call long-term impact. At the heart of that comes ethical leadership. And this is both from the funders, from the recipients, from the constituents that are meant to oversee all of this. We are in a deep, deep predicament at the moment. And it's not just a South African lens, it's a global lens that we are seeing at the moment. South Africa's context is a bit more unique. We've got this framework, which is a beautiful piece of legislation, which stands out as the cornerstone of policy to drive economic readdress in our country. We've got institutions that have been able to internalize BEE, not just as compliance, but as value-based transformation strategies. And they reap the benefits of having inclusive developmental goals. A large portion of what you guys are asking for and crying out, literally, I hear this as a cry. We have the policy tools that actually are meant to be addressing. So when you talk about equity in South Africa's context is twofold. Equity in many instances means ownership, which is the vast majority of Black people that are disenfranchised, not having equity. Equity is also access to market. So funding is not our predicament in South Africa at the moment. I mean, there was a beautiful study that was done by Gibbs Institute for Business that looked at enterprise and supplier development from a select few. And there was between 20 to 30 billion Rand worth of investment into enterprise and supplier development. That research study showed that 61% of the effective spend was, it didn't have proper framework associated with it. So I believe somebody mentioned, a tick box exercise. This is where we're at the moment. The level of optimism that we have is that from a multinational perspective and a global audience perspective, accountability is coming in. ROI is being measured now. So when you look at instances of ownership within our scorecard, management and control, enterprise and supply development, questions are now being asked. Our support in terms of the aspect of framework, while we have an overarching policy, which is BEE, the biggest procurer of services and goods in South Africa is government. And how do we restrict governments to ensure that those policies are in place? South Africa is fortunate in the sense that we've got a preferential procurement policy framework act, which is called the Triple PFA, and that holds government accountable to how they spend. And this is directly meant to be supporting historically disadvantaged groups. Now, South Africa being the beacon of hope that we are on a global footprint, it's starting to happen within Africa. We've got memorandum of understanding with the DRC now to come and teach us about how this framework worked, what failed, so that similar economic policies can be drafted. But when you talk about effective institutional tools, we're looking at ESG framework, which is linked to KPIs, because in South Africa, we've got a massive component where compliance is almost seen to be a burden until it has to cost you at the end of it. And this goes for internal individuals and also external. We've got our CABs, which is our community advisory boards. And these are meant to formalize local voices in project governance. So when you're looking at mining charter, etc., there's local involvement at all instances. You've got your fair trade tourism, other third-party certification standards that help us set global benchmarks within a South African context. But when you start to look and apply a global lens to this, and I think this is what we are seeing, frameworks like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, you've got your OECDs, which is Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development. Weirdly enough, they're in South Africa as we speak to speak to our Financial Services Charter Board to understand, are these guidelines being adhered to by multinationals? We've got the IFC, which is the International Finance Corporation Standards, which serve as a guiding principle for us. All of this is culminating to accountability. And unfortunately, if we don't have the ultimate goal and a unique value proposition, a one voice one mandate approach to this, I think on a global platform, we'll start to fail. South Africa is at this pendulum at the moment where we've got all of the tools from a legislative perspective, but we lack accountability, we lack inclusivity. The market is so open now that corporates are now focused on short-term goals as opposed to long-term goals, which doesn't benefit communities at large. Now, you've got the United Nations goals, but if you look at it from an African context, the Africa goals are so beautifully positioned for us. So you've got global players that have an opportunity to come and experience impact at a large scale. Our communities grow and develop. But when you look at the frameworks, I think one has to have this in a more conclusive manner where there's accountability that's set. And that could be a scorecard. That could be fines and penalties. There could be other forms of reporting, like impact reporting, to hold corporates accountable, to hold stakeholders and constituents accountable. If we're going to say we're going to do something, let's go and do it. And let's be able to be in that position to demonstrate what we've done. And I think the issue of subjectivity is a global pandemic at the moment. We're able to tailor our narratives to suit what markets we want to access. And it's not the version of truth that development and economic development actually needs.
Awesome. Thank you. I totally agree with you. We all can, I think, attest that travel and tourism is very much a pay-to-play industry. And oftentimes, that's why SMEs, underrepresented SMEs are excluded because they can't afford to be in the rooms where they can access markets to be able to meet with buyers, international, domestic buyers, to help grow their businesses. And so I want to come back to you, Kelly, and I want to ask you, how do power dynamics show up in destination development? And what strategies have you seen work to shift power to local businesses and communities?
Thanks, Stephanie. I think, yeah, you bring up a good point about needing to be able to access the room and the opportunity to actually have the potential to get a contract, say, from the travel industry or be promoted. And um, one of the ways that really the destinations and the travel companies can shift that is by making it part of their strategy to have put in some targets to how many more diverse, how more impactful their supply chain could be, and then seek out the ways in which to do that. Um, there's power dynamics from that's sort of stage of like getting in the door, but there's also interestingly, they play out throughout the whole process. So even when the travel industry is trying to be more equitable, and so coming at it from a good kind of intention, so looking to partner more with SMEs or purchasing uh, from community-owned or grassroots organizations, they do still hold that power of those contracts and the price they're willing to pay, the standards that they're expecting. So on the one hand, it's good for those organizations to go through that learning to be prepared, but at the same time, it can lead to some unintentional, unfair practices because um, whether it's pushing to get lower prices, sometimes not valuing community tourism or expecting a small enterprise to be cheaper or something like that. And so that those power dynamics can play out and they really we need to be ensuring that the travel industry is aware of it's not just making a decision, okay, I'm going to, make my supply chain more diverse and suddenly make it happen without any kind of awareness or intentions across the company to say this is going to take some time and kind of awareness and commitment on my side to do it right. Um, but when there is that intention, we've seen some of our partners spend time on helping us develop training modules on pricing, for example, or um, spending time with those community organizations or SMEs on their payment processes, just to make sure they're going to get paid on time. Going that extra mile to make sure those community partners are better equipped to handle those contracts.
Right.
And just being treated as a partner and as a business supplier, but also with some flexibility and sensitivity and just kindness for new enterprises that are kind of still learning the ins and outs of being part of the travel trade.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Timothy, I would love to hear your insight on this question, if you don't mind. Timothy, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am. I was just thinking about what Micah said, and I want to give a shout out to you, Micah, because I think that you framed the issue really beautifully and brilliantly. A couple of decades ago, if not longer, a number of business leaders approached the city of New York about what to us seemed like an economic agenda that was analogous to places like South Africa. At the time, the city of New York was purchasing $16 billion in goods and services. Now it is multiples of that. But then what they could document is that only 2% of contracts awarded went to small minority and women-owned businesses. And we put pressure on them to develop policies, programs, and measurable tools to redress this. And the tourism sector's participation was almost non-existent. But I'm happy to report that some progress is being made as a result of establishing advisory boards that monitored performance, mentoring programs that included aggregating reserved pools of contracts for those who were selected to be mentees, and other creative programmatic initiatives. So things have changed. And they're improving slowly, but there has to be a strong role of advocacy on the outside, and then an internal monitoring component to make sure that accountability is achieved. I can say a whole lot more, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Wow, this has been such a great, discussion, and I hope that people are getting a lot out of it. I appreciate the comments that you're posting in the chat. We have a few more questions that I really want to get through, so I'm going to ask my speakers if you can please condense your insights or your responses to 2 minutes or less so that we can get through the rest of the questions, because I think that they would be very helpful for the attendees to hear. So thank you all again. Charles, let's come back to you. I know you do a lot of work with Black chambers. So let's talk a little bit about the role of procurement. What role does procurement, especially inclusive procurement play in creating a more socially sustainable supply chain from your perspective?
I really believe that it's what's missing in terms of giving it value or credibility in a tourism aspect. And by that means that when there is well, let's just be frank. Historically, when it comes to business and commerce, this word trade mission has been out there. There's all these different entities, and quite frankly, it became the flavor of the day. For the past 10 years or 15 years, anybody and everybody can do a trade mission. And you go and you see things and you have some meetings and you spend a lot of money. And with your small business who may not be traveling, and particularly your first time venturing outside the country or to this particular host country or wherever they're going. And often it's done under the lens or guidance of government related agencies, or in cooperation with the embassy or the AmChams and these sorts of things. Well, that conditioned over a period of time to not yield results. There's no mandates, there's no commitments, and often they're very nice cooperative things between two different governments or two different people, bringing in foreigners in to see an opportunity. When there is a project or now they're calling, I think, economic summits and other things that are happening of this nature. And they're saying, here's these opportunities and here are these things. We like to get people together in advance and let them talk. And then, well, that's one of the things we're doing now is creating a environment where you could seek a partner or put a RFP out or say we have these opportunities. When we're able to have cooperation and make it part of a strategy where it is in fact supported by the head of state, then it resonates that much more, and you then can get junkets or groups of people or charter planes or make it very specific to that. When you're just doing and everyone knows this, I know I'm preaching to it. When you go just for we're going to go see the Nile, or we're going to see Victoria Falls, or we're going to see these geographic locations, or we're doing the eco side of that, or the animals, or these types of things. While you're there, you're looking at saying, that'd be a nice place to put a hotel, or that would be a nice thing to have over here. Or, I mean, we're sitting around bored at night. What are we going to do tonight? And I see some mentions in there too about entertainment entities or concerns being related and involved. So, this summer alone, you're seeing these huge stadium shows around various places of the world with these celebrities and artists performing. There's a lot of travel. There's a lot of money being spent. And in particular, I think this last weekend, Beyonce was in Las Vegas, and they were measuring the before and after effect of the economic input in that. And just like we've had, many of us have experienced the Olympics or the World Cup or any of these kinds of big event activities and things that go on. Well, as it started to get more and more sophisticated, we were starting to receive information and contacts about, would you like to be a vendor? Would you like to participate in this? Well, the tourism industry is way up here at the top of that ecosystem.
Yeah.
And you're cultivating and you're kind of get the luxury of setting the navigation, where people go, what they're going to visit, how, and if there is a almost like standards or application of saying, hey, I want to opt in, I want to be part. How do we support? Sometimes it's marketing, advertising. Anyway, I'm going long. I'm sorry.
No, but
I
you're
know.
making
I
some
want to
great
get to the
points.
Q&A too.
Yeah,
You got
but
me
no,
motivated.
you're making some great points. So thank you for that. So I want to talk a little bit about partnerships, because I think we can all agree that really nothing happens in this industry without partnerships. No one entity, business, tourism board can really function successfully without strategic partnerships. So let me address this to Ariki. What role do partnerships between tourism boards, academic institutions, and grassroots organizations play in scaling social sustainability?
I think a big role. So thank you for that question. I see that very often tourism boards are super busy engaging with the traditional stakeholders, right? They're, like you said, they're concerned with heads and beds. And so it's the hotels and the restaurants that they're worried about. And so they don't even think about the grassroots organizations. They don't even know what's going on very often at the destination. On the other hand, I've met a lot of grassroots organizations that have no idea what a DMO is, and they're busy, surviving. They're busy getting funding. They're running a business, so they don't have that luxury of kind of stepping back and thinking about more strategic issues. And so I think partnerships with academic institutions, one of the big opportunities there is that universities can have that linking function, right? We have the links to the DMOs, we have the links to the grassroots organizations. Also, we tend to have more of that global big picture kind of view because we do research all over the world, or we have partners in institutions all over the world. So I think that's an opportunity there. And we always think, oh, yes, this is a South African problem, but I've done research in Australia and in Thailand and in Iran, and the basic problems are always the same. So having that opportunity to compare. And then last but not least, I think in academia, we have access to young talent. And we have access to the future consumers and the future entrepreneurs. And so I think through that kind of partnership, both the DMOs and the grassroots organizations can really tap into the future, right, through these young people.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So before we wrap up and open up the call for questions, and if you have a question, please, you can post it in chat or just be prepared because we will have limited time for questions. But I want to close this conversation with each of our panel members addressing this one question. And I'm going to ask you if you could please address it within 30 to 45 seconds. That would be great so we can have some time for Q&A. So if you could recommend one immediate action that every tourism board, industry brand, NGO, government could take to embed social sustainability within their work, what would that be? And Arika, let's go ahead and continue with you.
So I would say think about language, because language frames, language is power. Think about the way you communicate, whether it's about your business or your DMO, but then also how you communicate with different groups. And I think if you kind of start thinking about how you do that, what words you use, and whether they actually are inclusive, whether they are promoting equity and well-being, then I think that's already a very good step.
Awesome. Thank you. Kelly.
Yeah, I would say to think about your supply chain as a means to immediately improve equity and social impacts, or at least work towards that result, because every purchase anyone makes has the power to shift the income to, whether it's a micro or small business from diverse communities across a destination that have ripple effects beyond their businesses, or social or environmental impact organizations. And these can improve outcomes for the place, uh, in satisfaction across local residents, and essentially moving that needle for the whole entire place if everyone is working towards that. So yeah, that would be what I
Awesome.
would
Great
say.
points. Thank you. Jonathan.
I think maybe more for the tourism boards, but applicable to everyone in the industry, is to move beyond flat numbers, like quantity, and focus on quality. Um, Quality of the traveler for the tourism boards, certainly, and the destinations, length of time, amount of money being spent, connection with local vendors. All of these things are much more important than the number of people who arrive. And I think the larger travel companies can apply that same methodology and provide a better experience for the travelers and a better impact for the host communities.
Excellent. Thank you. Timothy.
Kelly and I are on the same page, and I appreciate her analysis and her conclusion, but let me take a different tact at it. I think with the significant growth of over-tourism in major tourism markets, we believe that the promotion of secondary tourism markets and a redistribution of the flow of tourists across a nation or a region is vitally important to long-term sustainability in the tourism sector. And we believe that this is an important sustainable strategy, and it would benefit, as Kelly so articulately said, and involve local communities, including hotels and restaurants and others in the supply chain, in meeting sustainability standards set by recognized organizations. And this could also help to include local preferences for jobs, which are so critical, and the use of local farmers and products, which would have multiple impacts for local economies. So, Sister Kelly, I'm right with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Timothy. Charles.
I just really applaud the broad conversation that to me nets and yields into collaborations, cross marketing, cross merchandising, inclusion. Just as we're talking about including the stakeholders, but looking at the whole thing and giving everybody an opportunity to step forth and to speak. That's how we are able to attract people that may have not traveled before or did not consider one place versus another. And so that's how you do get into some of the secondary markets or some of the lesser um, advertised or promoted areas. So I like the collaborative approach and openness and welcomeness.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. And Micah.
Thanks, Stephanie. I think my encouragement would be to embellish and develop an ecosystem of impact. And at the heart of that, don't be fearful to invest in terms of skills development. The training aspect and the capacitation for SMMEs, our communities, businesses at large become crucial. There's a powerful African saying that I'll leave you with, which is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And an ecosystem of impact sets the precedent for us to go together. Thanks.
Wow. And thank you. Wow. Thank you so much to all of our panel members. So let's see if we have any questions from the audience. Reza, if you can help me, if you have a question, do we have the raise your hand function available here?
Yes, we do have, and there are many questions, but I think it's better that who has question can raise his hand or her hand. There will be anybody questions? Yes, Bukhara, yeah, and Emmanuel. Good to see you both here.
Thank you. Should I go or somebody else?
Hey, go ahead, Emmanuel, yeah.
But also,
Okay,
please
thank
be
you very
mindful to keep your question short and
Okay.
questions only instead of comments so that we can try to get to as many questions as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Emmanuel Frimpong. I'm calling from Ghana. So my question is, how do we get to partner with any of the speakers? I work with the Africa Tourism Research Network, and we focus on sustainability. And I'm so excited about what we've learned. How do we move from the talking here to partnership and collaboration? Thank you.
Well, maybe I can answer that question for you. So as we have been working together, you have a profile page on our website, and people just can go and contact you there. I think that's one of the so the contact is there, and the recording will be there. The biography of the speakers will be there, so you can contact any of them, including of course you yourselves and others.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Next question, you want to, Reza?
Yeah, I just want to mention, I see my very good friend, Mr. Luis D'Amor, the founder of the International Institute for Peace through Tourism. Very happy to see you, Lou, here. Maybe you cannot speak, I know, but we love you and we think about you. So I don't know. Next question.
I see Burkhard.
Okay, thank you. Also, my first comment is going to Lou. It's our common friend, and I know Lou since 25 years or so. Lou, every time I see you, you look 10 years younger, really. So, I like I like this complete discussion. Please allow me, my English is not perfect. I try my very best. I'm 100% behind of what Charles said. We need drivers like Charles. And so I think what we need is an organization which bound the interest of the small and medium enterprises together with the help of the large players. What we need is an international chamber of travel and tourism, like a chamber of commerce, but international. There are some international chambers of commerce for that or that industry, but we do not have this for the tourist industry, which is international mostly. And we need an international chamber of travel and tourism, which has a lot of answers under one umbrella, and which can be together with UN tourism, an important voice for the political decision makers. And we have seen how important tourism is for some small destinations during the period of COVID. So a lot of people lost their job. Some somehow survived. The big players, they closed 50% of their hotel chain, but they're still alive. But how much people depend from travel and tourism? This is about 15% of our planet. So the tourist industry probably is, beside of agriculture, the largest employer. And we need to give the responsibility to the tourist industry to get the responsibility from the political players. And there is no voice, and everybody wants to try to invent the wheels again. We don't need 100 associations trying to do the same. We need one organization which is strong. And of course, this organization also needs to follow what Ludamour have started long years ago. So we need an international chamber of travel and tourism. We need an international travel and tourist industry court. The most court cases are terrible for the tourist industry because the judge don't understand this business. We need an international tourist industry investment and development bank, a bank for the tourist industry, international. So everything what, for example, Jonathan has said, should be solved with this bank, working, of course, with a lot of other banks. I know that this is already on the way. There are already documents with lawyers in Amsterdam to install such a bank, hopefully in Luxembourg. So this is not so easy. You cannot push a button and it will start. It needs years and years and a lot of experts.
Thank you
But
so
some
much.
things are solved. I have no question. I just have this comment. And
Yes.
this was more than 1 minute, but I think this.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate your comment and your passion. Let's see, who else? We have a question in the chat that I will read, and we'll have one of our panel members address it. How do you see the tension between social sustainability goals and the dominant capitalist systems shaping tourism supply chains, particularly when it comes to integrating SMEs from marginalized communities? Which one of our speakers would like to address that question? Okay, I'll call on somebody. Micah.
Yeah, look, we've seen some tension from a South African context. I think we've got three definitive reporting structures at the moment. You've got the BE legislation, which is promulgated by government. You've got the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations have set, and then you've got the ESG goals as well. I think where this becomes almost tension is that you've got three definitive budget streams that are driven towards this, which frustrates the corporate environment. But if we're able to integrate SDGs, ESGs, and from a South African context, the BE framework, which, by the way, we've been able to do through the ecosystem of impact that we've developed for organizations. You know, I have one centralized budget with three different reporting mechanisms, but what matters is the quality of programs that allow for this to be administered. And this, it requires engagement at a macro level and at a micro level, which goes into communities and actually starts at grassroots development. And if we're able to do that, I believe there'll be lesser tension between that. And to address the capitalist systems, If you're looking at the mindset of the corporate from a South African context and from a global context is that these become immense value prospects for new markets, for retention of existing customer bases. And that's the trends that we are seeing at the moment. So we are seeing very intentful investment that is going towards particular target markets that can grow both the marginalized community from a benefit perspective, the corporate from a revenue growth, and I think countries and constituents holistically in terms of assistance. I hope that gives some clarity there.
Thank you so much, Micah. And on that note, we're going to get ready to wrap up, but I want to say thank you so very much to all of our panel members for a very insightful discussion. And I hope that all of our attendees, you've gained some practical solutions and strategies for leveraging social sustainability to support destination management and supplier diversity initiatives. I also want to say thank you again to all of our attendees for taking time to join our webinar, and we invite you to join us for future webinars. I also invite you to learn more about the Institute of Tourism at institutetourism.com and Disrupt for Change at disruptforchange.com. So, Reza, if you don't have any final words, then we're going to conclude this webinar. Again, thank you all so very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and all the speakers. It was really great. I just want to mention that the recording will be available from tomorrow, including the biography of all the speakers. Each speaker has a dedicated page, so you can find them and you can contact them as well. And also the website of Mrs. Stephanie Jones will be there. So if you need to contact her or have more information. Thank you so much, everybody. If there are no other questions or comments, we conclude here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you for being here, everyone.
Great session.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thanks for having us, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank-
everyone.